Thanks for coming to the talk today. We're going to talk about AI BI Dashboards, AI BI Genie, and specifically how we can kind of push it to the limit. My name's Noah. I'm a delivery solutions architect with the Databricks Field Engineering org. So I work primarily with our big strategic customers, making sure use cases are actually making it to production. And then when they make it to production, that they're running scalably, sustainably, all that kind of fun stuff. I've got here with me Adam. Adam's a staff engineer with the Genie team. So I'll be talking about some of the dashboard techniques that I've seen that are really effective. And then I'll pass it to Adam later to talk about some of the Genie mechanics that I think you guys will like. There's a number of different talks here this week. If you're looking for talks about like intro to AI BI, or if you're looking for talks about some of the newest features, we've got some of the other talks listed here on our slide. Specifically for us, what we wanted to do was take a look and talk about some of the advanced techniques that you can do today that you can take back with you to your company tomorrow and apply it. And so we'll talk about kind of the product as it exists today and some of the more advanced features that you can use to push it to the limit, so to speak. So I'll start us off here. Every product talk at Summit this week starts off with this slide. We're going to talk about some future-facing things. Please don't take that as a promise, legally speaking, and some other things. But for us specifically, Adam and I are going to talk about how to push AI BI to the limit, which means that in some cases, we're going to be pushing right up against some of the rough edges in the product. Just know that where there's limits or where some of the techniques are a little bit awkward, most of that stuff is roadmapped to be easier in the next bit. But we thought some of the techniques that we're showing here today would be still useful and still worth trying out and getting familiar with. So I wanted to start with why I'm so excited about AI BI in general. And the story behind it, most customers have a data platform that looks something like this. You've got data on one side that you're ingesting, you're doing some data engineering, you're doing maybe some machine learning, et cetera, and you're then serving it as an output to users. And the reason why I'm excited about AI BI specifically is I tend to think about data platforms kind of as input and output. So on the input side, most people have, you might have terabytes of data that you've put investment into. You might have thousands or millions of hours of compute to build those data sets. You put thousands of hours into data governance, making sure the data is clean and trustworthy and reliable and secure and doesn't breach PII and all that kind of fun stuff. But it's the output side where you're actually taking that investment and you're leveraging it to do things like insights, to do things like decisions, predictions. And that's where you leverage the investment that you've made in the foundation to get the business value. And so for us, when we're prepping this talk, for us it was the more things that we can do, the more we can empower you to improve the output, the better you can leverage that investment that you've made on your core data set. And so that's why I'm very passionate about AI BI, which is why I'm here giving this talk. But it's a really cool way to expose the data and the investment that you've already made. So with that, we're going to talk about three things today. First, we'll talk about how to infuse intelligence into your dashboards. And I'll take a look at some of the techniques using things like AI query. Second, we're going to talk about how to design for scale. So thinking about the caching mechanics with AI BI and how you can best optimize for them to scale as you go up to thousands of users. And then I'll pass to Adam here to talk about the Genie feedback loop and a couple interesting techniques that we've seen on how to supercharge it and make it a faster feedback loop as you're curating your Genie space. So with that, I want to talk about intelligence. When you're thinking about dashboard authoring, there's generally three places intelligence tends to show up. The first is around using GenAI for authoring. And there's some other talks this week if you want to learn about Assistant and the ways that Assistant can help you with authoring. On the other side, we tend to have GenAI for consumption. So that tends to be more of the Genie side, where you have a business user asking a question about the data. And for that, we'd say, OK, Genie is probably the right tool for that. I want to specifically focus in the middle and take a look at a couple ways that you can use GenAI actually in your dashboard and in some of your analysis. The key technique that I'll talk about here is using a tool called AI query. Historically, data platforms have had machine learning. You've had large language models. You've had a lot of capabilities. But for analysts have struggled to use it because a lot of those tools require SDKs or require hitting APIs or require Python. And as an analyst doing some basic SQL or doing analysis from a dashboard, that's a very hard interface to do. So Databricks rolled out what we call AI query and a handful of other AI functions that do similar things or more specific things. But that gives analysts a good interface to be able to incorporate that into their dashboard. AI query has two parts. It's got the model or the agent or the endpoint that you want hit, and then you pass a plain English prompt, and you get plain English back. And so as a quick example here, hitting some of the, I took a screenshot of an example I did earlier, hitting a Claude model. Just say hello, and then you get the response back from Claude. If you're looking for more task-specific things, there's a couple other AI functions out there like summarize or classify, but all of them can be used in a dashboard setting. And you can use them outside dashboards as well in pipelines or from third-party tools. But I'll do a quick demo here of what that looks like and how you can incorporate that into your dashboard. So I'll click out of here. I'll bring up my demo dashboard. So I've got a demo dashboard here. I've called it Lakehouse Intelligence. This is built on the Bakehouse data set that's available in every workspace if you look under the samples catalog. I've got rough overview. I've got some information on sales here. And so overall sales here, you can take a look at some of the numbers. Here's how many things have been sold. The first thing I'll talk about here is a little bit lower. We've got some review data. And so people have done reviews online of my bakehouse, and you can see their various things. And I'd like to analyze them in a couple interesting ways. So if I take a look at the data here, you can see it's got review date and franchise, but I'd like to analyze that review data. So first technique I'll show you is around AI query in terms of analyzing that plain text language. If I flip to my data tab here, I've got my review data. Right now it's just a basic select star from that sample data set. And then I've got an AI query handy here that I'll show here. I'm asking Meta Llama to do a response for me. I'm saying, take the sentiment of that review for each review that you're looking at and classify it into positive or negative or mixed. And then a little bit of prompt engineering here about, give me some lowercase, one word, and then I want it as a sentiment column. So what I'll do, take this, and I'll add it to my query. And if I run this, and I bring the results up, you can see when it runs, it will have a new column here called the sentiment of the review. And then for each review here, we can see whether it's positive, negative, or mixed. And what that lets me do as a dashboard author, now I can come back to my dashboard. And what I can do, I can drop a filter on. And I can filter on that review data, and I can filter on the sentiment. And now I can filter now down to just the negative reviews, for example. And I can see, OK, here's the negative reviews, and here's what people were disappointed by, et cetera. So that's a basic kind of text analysis way. But there's some other cooler things that you can do, especially around overall dashboard commentary. When I build dashboards, I'm often giving the same sort of updates and synthesis every time. And so if I go back to my data set, I'll show you how you can use AI query to generate some of the higher level commentary and do some summarization that might be applicable in other ways. So AI query is a function. It takes some data. It's got no built-in context about what you're doing. And so I've got a small table here that I've got where I've summed up the revenue and I've summed up the sales. And I'd like AI query to give me some commentary that I can put on my dashboard. In this case, I'm actually feeding it to a custom agent I've got deployed in the workspace. And I'm doing a basic prompt that says, just give me some commentary. And I'm passing in the revenue dollars that I have here, and I'm passing in the sales, and say, give me a couple sentences of commentary on it. So if I add this into it, so what I'll do is I'll take this here, and I'll turn this into a CTE. So I'll say with base table, if I spell it right, as something like this. Then I'll say, run this query, use this data points, et cetera, and then return that as a result. And I can run this here, and I get a little bit of commentary. And it's not super insightful commentary, but it's interesting. It's a little bit easier and nicer to read than it would be to look at a raw table. But we can go further than that. AI query takes text. There's different ways of representing entire tables as text, thinking like CSV. And so one more example where I can do overall commentary for my dashboard. I've pre-built this example here, and I'll start at the bottom, where I basically I concatenate every row in a table and pull that together. And I will pass that as context into my AI query. And I give it a couple instructions here. Specifically, I say, hey, format the answer with HTML, because that looks way better, et cetera. And then I have a little bit up here where I'm taking every column in each row, and I'm concatenating that back down together as well. So I'm turning the entire table into a string. And if I run this here, it'll take the data, take this small table that I have here where I've grouped things by product. So I have some information on products. And it generates this commentary here. And you can see it's a little bit formatted. And you can see it's got a bit more of analysis about the different products. And what I can do is I can go back to here. I can take visualization. I can take it on my sales summary, and I'll do a table viz, and I'll make my commentary visible. I will allow HTML formatting, and then I like to turn off the resizable so it appears nicely. And so now I've got this AI commentary widget that I can put at the top. When I look at the dashboard, I see the overall commentary, and that's a nice way to enter the dashboard and get a bit of context. And this is specifically on sales data, but you can imagine if you've got data in your company that you want to summarize, you can imagine how this might be useful if you've got customer support cases, if you've got ticket data, if you've got all this kind of summary stuff that you want to do and not give the same commentary over and over. That could be a helpful kind of way to surface that. So with that, I'll go back to the presentation here. A couple takeaways from this that I want you to walk away with. As you're thinking about infusing intelligence into your dashboard, take a look at the models and the agents and the other AI you have in your workspace. A lot of the stuff exists already. Think about using AI query if you're generating the same commentary all the time, or if you need to synthesize a bulk of data, especially plain text data. And the last thing in here, if you're a data analyst, consider partnering with your data science team if you need a more specific agent. If you want people to build things with vector search or additional context, that can be a very helpful tool. With that, let's start the second section here. And so that was the first kind of technique that you can use to push your dashboards to the limit. Second one I want to talk about is about designing for scale. And there's 3 points that kind of set up this section. That dashboard performance gets important as you scale. Both from a user experience side, if you're scaling to thousands of users, you want to make sure the dashboard stays snappy, stays responsive, people are able to get that insight. The second is around serving costs. So as you scale your overall data set up to hundreds of gigabytes, et cetera, you want your dashboard to confidently do that without driving your costs through the roof. The second thing to know is that AI BI dashboards gracefully scale. So there's functionality to use things in browser if you're working on a small data set, and then it gracefully uses DB-SQL as your data set starts to increase. And so thoughtfully designing your dashboard around some of those mechanics are really a way to maintain both the cost optimization and the experience optimization. And I'll walk through a couple mechanics here in the next little bit to show kind of where the design levers are. So the general guidance, if you walk away from here, there's 3 points. One is keep the data set under the documented limit. That's 100,000 records currently. If the data set's under 100,000 records, it can be in the browser cache, and it can be very snappy. The second is use filters rather than parameters. Parameters will always fire a query to DB-SQL when you change them, whereas filters are able to use and be transformed locally. And then the third point, for some technical reasons I'll get into, if you can publish the dashboard with embedded credentials, that is, use the dashboard author's credentials for the data access, that's a much better experience, or much more likely to be able to invoke caches than the publish as viewer. If you haven't thought about this before, whether a query is done or not is a little bit subtle. So I've highlighted on the right, if you see the little spinner on widgets, or if you're seeing the spinner on the overall dashboard, chances are a query is firing. And you can load a dashboard and you can take a look at your query history to see specifically kind of what things are going there. And so I'll show a quick example here. I took a video. There's 3 versions of this. The one on the left is the same data set. This is the TPCH sample data set that's available under the samples catalog. So feel free to run these queries yourself and run this test. But it is 99,000 records. And so I put a limit there. And you can see as I change through the filter, it's a very snappy experience. It's happening all locally, and it's going quickly. The middle one, I've done a limit of 101,000 records. And I said that the current limit is 100,000 records for the local cache. And you can see that. So every time I change to a new thing, you can see the little widget spinning. And you can see it's a little bit slower to respond because it's invoking DB-SQL, which is powerful when you get a larger data set. But if you can, if there's no design reason to keep it to under 100,000, then this is a good optimization to do. And then just for completion on the right, I've got the same version, but using a parameter. And you can see because I'm changing that parameter every time, it's firing a query. It's not able to use a local cache. So if you're thinking about dashboards, the number one tip, keep your data sets under 100,000, and you'll be able to have smoother experience this way. But if you've done some experimenting with dashboards, there's a bit of nuance that's going on. You know that sometimes parameters can actually be cached. And so I'll walk through some of the technical mechanics behind it to get into some of the nuance here. So this is a sample dashboard. On the right, I've got a dashboard. It's got a base data set. So again, select from my sample data. I've got some theoretical widgets. So I've got some filters, some visualizations. And when you're thinking about a dashboard, you can think about how every widget applies a transformation to that base data set. And naively, without any optimizations, every widget will fire a query to the warehouse. And so in this case, I've got two widgets, the filter visualization. You can see they fire two queries to the warehouse. And this is basically how a dashboard works, and it can be effective. But you can imagine as you start to scale that dashboard, as you start to add widgets, you add multiple pages, you can fit hundreds of widgets on a page. You'll quickly start to overwhelm the warehouse. You'll start to see queuing, and things will just be a little bit slower and less snappy. And so AI/BI dashboards, as it exists, and the engineering team is always making changes in optimization, so always keep an eye out on the documentation. And sorry about the cutting out here. But the way it exists today, there's two services. First is inside the dashboard, or inside the filter side, there's a check. It says when you change the widget, when you change a filter, when you load things, it's going to check, is the data set already in the browser? And is it under 100,000 rows? And if it is, it can just serve it from inside the browser. And that was the demo that I showed earlier, keeping things under 100,000 rows. If it's not, if either it's larger or if it's not already there, it goes to the workspace, or the data plane that we like to call it. There's a check there that says, has the same query been run by the same user within 4 hours? And if it has been, then it's able to pull it from a query cache. If it's not, then it sends it to the warehouse to execute and likely add to the query cache as it goes. So there's a couple comments to make along the way here. The first is, because of that check, keeping data sets under 100,000 records is the number one optimization tip to have when you're designing dashboards. It's the easiest and fastest and most effective change you can make. The second is, know that because of the performance and the way that cache works, that dashboard data will be cached up to 24 hours by default, so that your dashboard is cost optimized, scalable, et cetera. You can manually refresh that data by clicking the refresh button on the dashboard, but it's a behavior of the way the queries work to keep dashboards cost efficient. The third thing is, because it checks to see is the same query been run by the same user, this is where embedded credentials becomes very important. If you publish your dashboard with embedded credentials, everybody's sharing the same cache. And what that means is if user 1 is going in the morning and changing things, user 2, 3, and 4 will be able to use the same cache. And if you run a job overnight to refresh the dashboard at 6 a.m. every day, users 1, 2, 3, when they come in the morning, will be able to hit the same cache. And so that's, if your data permissions allow it, if you don't need row-level security, if you don't need individual access rights, then using embedded credentials is an effective optimization technique. And then the fourth thing to know is if you do all this right, if you design your dashboard accordingly, you can get the compute charges for your dashboard down to as little as once per day, because the dashboard the first time be cached, and you don't invoke DB-SQL charges to load the dashboard. And so this is why these mechanics are very important to keep in mind as you're developing. There's two nuances to this, and I'll show you. We talked about the general guidance earlier. There's two nuances that, based on, now that you know both the browser local and the control plane cache, some nuances that go into this that I'll show. The first is, if you've ever used parameters, I told you earlier, every parameter fires a query. If you've ever used parameters and you're going back and forth between values, you know that's actually not 100% true. And so I've done a quick demo here where I'm using a parameter, and you can see as I select a parameter, it fires a query. You see the little loading spinner. And so I'll go back and forth between two. So I picked 168, and then I picked 69. And now when I go back to 68, because I've already picked it before, you'll see it loads very quickly. There's no loader spinner. And that's because that specific query has been cached. That same query that I would be fired when I pick 68 has been done by the same user within the last 24 hours. And so it's loaded from cache. And so this is just one of those nuances to add on as you're starting to get more advanced with dashboards to keep in mind. And it sort of explains the behavior that you'll see when you're using parameters. The second, other slightly more interesting example is using parameters to keep data sets less than 100,000. So here's an example dashboard. By default, it's got 30 million records. This is the full line item data set samples catalog. And you can see if I'm picking filters, they're firing queries. It's more than 100,000 records. It's 30 million. But if I come over to this parameter, and I pick a strategically chosen value, so I filter things by only those orders that are more than 1998, it's only 50,000 records, which means it now fits into cache. And so you can see here, now that I have that, as I pick filters, it loads very quickly. And so a really good idea is if you've got, even if you can't get your data set under 100,000 records, it can be helpful to do this if you've got common filters, like maybe filtering, or the majority of your users access the data from headquarters. If you have a parameter there with a default headquarters value, then the majority of users are going to get a nice cached experience. But it's still there available if somebody wants to change that parameter to a different date or a different office or somewhere else and play. All right. So that's the second piece around the behavior. So think about data sets within 100,000 records. Use your embedded credentials where it's possible, because that will do the shared cache. If you use a scheduled job overnight, that can help build that cache for users. If you've got less than 100,000 rows, avoid using parameters, use filters wherever possible. And then lastly, if you don't like these mechanics, if you want your own custom shared cache or specific things, you can consider using materialized views from the Lakeflow project. And those can be a good custom cache if you want specific behavior and control the refreshes more granularly. So I'll pass to Adam here and talk through some of the Genie pieces.
So yeah, let's switch over to Genie now. So I want to talk about how you can supercharge the feedback loop within Genie. And by that, I mean the interplay between authors and consumers. And I think of this feedback loop as having multiple stages, right? First, the author kind of curates the Genie space. And I'm going to show some advanced curation and instruction techniques, which are maybe not obvious. Next, consumers or business users come in and they ask questions. I'll show an API integration, how to meet these consumers where they are, as well as our files feature, which is in gated public preview right now. And then finally, when you're reviewing what your business users are doing within the space, we have the monitoring tab. But what if you really want to go deeper and actually learn about what kind of questions they're asking, how Genie is performing, and I'll show a pattern I'm calling Genie on Genie to achieve that. So before going into advanced curation, I wanted to give a general framework for how to think about this. So behind all the magic, Genie ultimately is just Databricks SQL under the hood in a read-only execution environment. Now, you might need to teach Genie about some of the more advanced features for now, like AI query, sentiment analysis. Us as a Genie product team, we're right now laser focused on quality and getting Genie to respond with correct answers. And that means we're not opening up the full breadth of the default settings at the moment. But as a space author, you do have the capability to add these special instructions to enable your business users with these more powerful cases. And the other thing I wanted to mention about instructions is they can influence follow-up questions, the starter questions that you see, as well as visualizations. Great, so I'm going to jump into the demo. So this will be pretty rapid fire. I will go over and jump ahead here. Great. So say I've set up this Bakehouse franchise manager Genie. This is the same data set that Noah was showing. I have this space. I want my franchise managers to come in here and be able to answer questions about how their franchises are doing. So I've set up some curated starter questions. This question is, how much daily revenue did my franchises generate? So this is an opportunity to show how you can use the current user SQL function to customize the starter questions based on who's asking the question. So I've given a general instruction saying, the user asking questions is a franchise manager, as well as given a SQL instruction, where I'm basically, saying if the user is to ask what are my franchises, I put a filter on this current user SQL function, and I specify it in this franchise manager mappings table, which I'll show in a sec. So here's what that franchise manager mappings table looks like. Right now, it's just myself and Noah, our email addresses, and which franchise IDs we control. And then if the user is to ask a question like, how much daily revenue did my franchises generate? From that instruction, Genie is able to connect the dots and basically return data that's relevant for me. So here's the join happening for franchise ID in that mappings table that I specified. So one of the suggested follow-up questions here is, what was the revenue generated by my franchises on May 15th? So this is an opportunity to show how you can influence suggested follow-up questions in the general instructions. I have a markdown section in the general instruction, always a good idea, and I call out, May 15th is International Cookie Day, and suggested follow-ups, ask about sales for this date. Maybe there is some big promotion running that day, and I want to kind of influence my business users to go down that path. So this shows how you can kind of have a relationship with the people who are using Genie, suggest what they should look into next. So next I want to show, Noah showed sentiment analysis in the context of a dashboard, but you can also do this in Genie. So I have this question here, how many positive and negative reviews did my franchises get? And I'm able to get this pie chart and do a quick spot check. So the way that I've set this up is basically a SQL instruction where I provide a very simple, what is the sentiment of my reviews example question, and then I teach Genie about this AI analyze sentiment function using our foundation models. And documentation in these instructions is a great place to call out, this takes in a string, it can return positive, negative, neutral, or mixed. And now Genie is able to basically, it knows about this function, it can use it. A more advanced case that I wanted to show is, here I'm saying, if the user says run the following AI prompt on all reviews, and then they specify a string, I want to pass that string into the AI gen function, and in this case, concatenate it with a review in mind. And I've also given some usage guidance to Genie to kind of explain what I'm doing because it's more complex. So we can go over here. So in this case, maybe the business user asks, run the following AI prompt on 10 reviews, generate a one-sentence response to the review for an email. So here I have my reviews, and Genie is very easily able to come up with a customized response for that particular product review. But we can get creative here. I'm saying generate a haiku response to the email. I think that the sad one is pretty funny, maybe a 6 out of 10. Cool, so that's a few of the advanced curation techniques. So I mentioned that files are currently in gated public preview, soon to be ungated. And essentially this feature allows business users in a conversation to add CSVs or Excel spreadsheets, and then they're accessible within the context of that conversation. So when you drop the file, it can basically be done via this button here. I can immediately see this data is showing up from this sheet, which is a bunch of customer emails. So what would be the use case here? So say I'm a franchise manager and I have some unique processes for myself. I have some promo website, and when users sign up, it drops their email address in a Google Sheet. Pretty common. So what I can do now is basically pull that data into Genie and join it with my governed data. So now I'm asking to break down the customers who signed up for the promo by country. Genie is able to figure out, okay, there's a customer email address column from my spreadsheet, there's an email address column in my sales data, and I can get some quick insights out of here. So one of the reasons why we built this is we were finding lots of times people exported data from Databricks into spreadsheets and doing VLOOKUPs and that sort of pattern. So now instead, your business users can bring that data into Databricks where you can audit it, learn about what they're doing, and kind of have more visibility over what they're doing. Great. So one of the other ways to kind of drive usage, increase this feedback loop, is to actually meet these business users where they are. And while we want business users to come to Databricks, using products like Teams and Slack is also very common. So I've gone ahead and deployed this simple Genie Slack bot, probably 150 lines of Python, which calls our conversation API. And now I've basically added a bot to this workspace, and I have this question here, which I'll kick off. What were the total weekly sales in May for all franchises? And once I fire that, hopefully Genie will respond in a second. If the warehouse is asleep, then maybe not. Basically, oh, there we go. Now we're thinking. Or that was from earlier. Anyway, the point is, once Genie responds, you'll basically get a description, a formatted table, a query. You can do all sorts of things with commands. I'm really just scratching the surface here. And once these business users actually ask these questions, you can analyze their usage in the monitoring tab, where you can see the question that was asked. You can look at the SQL that was generated. The monitoring tab also gives you the ability to kind of filter by positive and negative marked reviews, also kind of known as thumbs up, thumbs down. Cool. So what if I wanted to go deeper here, and I have 100 users in my Genie space. They're asking all sorts of questions. I don't really know what's working well, what's working not, and I want to kind of take my space to the next level. So we have the full power of the lakehouse at our disposal, so I wanted to introduce this pattern I built called Genie on Genie. Essentially what you can do is create a Genie space that analyzes another Genie space. So in this case, I've basically taken advantage of the audit logs, which are one of the system tables that admins have access to. And these contain kind of CRUD type operations that occur in the workspace on, in Dashboards, Genie, all different products. And so if we just go ahead and look at an example of what this looks like, I could ask what actions were taken in the Genie space in the past week. I can kind of see some high-level CRUD operations. But I've also configured this particular Genie space to look at the one that I've specified, the one with this ID. And so now, with some additional instructions, I can say, what is the thumbs up and thumbs down rate for all the messages sent in this Genie space? And I can see I have a 25% thumbs up rate, 12.5% thumbs down rate. I could generate a line chart, analyze these on an ongoing basis to see how my quality is evolving in an online setting. And I can use that to determine whether it's ready to promote or how my space is doing. Another thing that I could do is I could ask about this file feature that I just demoed. How many files were added to the Genie space? Which users added those files to the Genie space? Maybe I set up a meeting with Adam and I ask him, why did you need to use this offline spreadsheet? Is there something about our platform that we could fill this gap? And so it's really about working with your business users to kind of unblock them, but still use what they're doing to kind of inform how you can upgrade your platform. So one thing that is not contained in the audit logs is the actual message sent or the SQL query that was generated. But we can still get this. So in this case, I've created basically a daily Python notebook, which runs as a job. And in this job, it contains like 150 lines of Python code, which calls our conversation API again. And it basically will download the messages sent that day, the query content, and it'll drop them into a table. So once this data is here, I can look at the messages and the queries that have been occurring in the space in kind of this structured format. So I can ask questions like, what is the average number of tables used in queries? 1.38. So that could give some indication of, okay, there's some joins going on. Maybe if this number is too high, it's too complex, and I need to simplify my pipeline. And how is this working under the hood? Again, I'm using these SQL functions, in this case AI extract, to basically extract the table names from the query. So that's kind of combining some earlier techniques we learned with this new technique. Or I could ask something like, what are the most commonly used tables in the queries? And see what's being used a lot, what's not being used a lot, and trying to trim down the amount of context that the Genie space has. Great. So that was a lot, so I want to give some takeaways. The first takeaway is instructions can unlock the full power of Databricks SQL. Even if they're not exposed in the default product today, you have the ability as the author to open up anything that Databricks SQL can do as long as it's in that read-only execution environment. The second takeaway is that AI-enhanced data analysis is now for everyone in your organization. These techniques with AI extraction, classification, generative AI, they can run these on governed or ungoverned data, combine the two of them, and I think it's really going to drive a lot of productivity. The third takeaway is that by reviewing these usage patterns from your business users, you can learn about gaps in your system, fill those gaps. Maybe people are doing sentiment analysis a lot in an ad hoc way in Genie, and you want to turn that into an actual pipeline to reduce on cost. I think that's totally reasonable, and so you should unblock your users to do these kinds of things, but also learn from it and kind of optimize it. Great. So just to kind of conclude what we talked about today. So first, Noah showed how you can infuse intelligence in dashboards using things like AI query to do really powerful summarization and other things. Second, Noah showed how dashboards are designed for multiple scales. If you keep your data sets under 100,000 rows, you can have that great client-side caching behavior, but also embedding credentials makes it so that if you have a large data set, you can kind of optimize for that. And then finally, we talked about how you can supercharge the Genie feedback loop with these more advanced techniques and kind of work together with your business users and try to achieve, kind of bottoms-up business intelligence where you're learning from each other rather than telling them they can't do things and Yeah, I think it's exciting. Great, so yeah, as always, you can scan this QR code to continue your learning journey. There's classes, self-paced and structured trainings. We have some AI BI video and demos linked here. And as always, yeah, complete your surveys. Let us know if there's anything useful here or things we could have improved on. And yeah, I think that's all we have planned.